This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Fresh off of still vibing on a great conversation last week with one of the premier insiders keeping track of the Dallas Mavericks, our man Kevin Gray Jr. And we're riding into what really is a heck of a way to start, embracing the spring. Great basketball, some achievements made. It's a good time to really start embracing the parquet floor. My man, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, www.shawsports.net, Big Huna PNC. What's good, man?
A lot is good, man. It's always great to be here on the baseline, doing what we do here. Again, shout outs, as you alluded to Kevin Gray Jr. for what he was able to bring to us. I think we might have stirred the pot for the Mavs a little bit. They went on a little mini losing streak, lost 3 of their last 4.
We jinxed them. We gave them the kiss of death.
Yeah, that's Sports Illustrated jinx. We put it on them a little bit, but they're still riding high and still have a very good chance here to be competitive in the Western Conference. So we didn't do it too bad, but it's really interesting what you alluded to, because I think about when we talk about some milestones that we'll obviously get into here, it really does get me thinking back to our earlier conversation about like LeBron and when he leaves and who's ready to take up the mantle and so forth and so forth. But we have a lot of really good players that probably only have 2 to 3 years left. And really, again, how do we feel about the state of the league? We're seeing some things happen here now. And I think it's just a little bit eye-opening, as I think for many of us, the basketball mortality of some of our heroes and people we saw growing up, like that's coming to a close, and a new generation needs to be able to come in here and take the baton. So I think great conversation, but the NBA is in a very interesting place here, transitional space here, I think, in the next couple of years.
Yeah, so I think it's great because we're going to talk about LeBron James's milestone achievement, first in NBA history. I think that we definitely need to put this on, on the list of things as we start, really entering that conversation discourse, basketball mortality, and what is viable for just like our generation and also for the next generation. What are tangible measurements and metrics to really start elevating some of these guys into the possibilities of, are they capable of being a part of that Mount Rushmore of basketball? Or has the state of basketball changed to such a degree that the level of greatness is there, but the I guess the word I'm looking for is the allure of being there may not have the same teeth as what it would have been some 15, 20 years ago. And so we have to be cognizant of those things, Shaw, right? Like when we're having these conversations, we can't dismiss that and just say, because that then just makes us being curmudgeon in our ways. And I don't think that even as a viable podcast that we've been now for over a decade, that we just dismiss what the notion is for what the current generation is using as a gauge to elevate greatness for their players, right?
Yeah.
But I think a true, honest conversation should be had and needs to be had, because if they don't understand what it took for some of these guys to do the things that they're doing and why it's being considered in the circle or the culture of basketball, whether it be fan or player, if they don't understand that, then what metrics or what measurements are they truly using to elevate what they consider greatness? Is it in their mind? Is it AI generated? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like there has to be a true conversation that has to be had, because it's the only way for us to really realistically look at whether or not the next guys that are in line are ready to take that mantle.
Yeah, and it is a conversation that I think there's going to be a lot of people who have a lot to say about it and will think one way or the other. I mean, really anecdotal here, but I think it's been interesting to watch this season more particularly. Paul George has gotten a lot of love, and I think from his younger contemporaries, if you will, and are bringing up only the aspect it's like, well, your GOAT isn't necessarily my GOAT or the player archetype that I would want to emulate, so forth and so forth. And Paul George has actually gotten a lot of love from younger players, like, I would like to be like him. They feel like he's the quintessential guy, if you will. Now, He's probably going to be a Hall of Famer. I don't think there's a lot of doubt about that as well, too. But he's not, and I don't think ever was really at any stage like the face of the league. But I think he knows how do players resonate with, you know, the players that are in the league currently. I mean, up and coming players, how do they resonate with current players, and how do they pattern their games after them? I just think it's a really interesting situation, because I think now we're in the space of, is Jason Tatum at 26 years old, you know, is recording his birthday today, is he ready to be the next guy? Is SGA ready to be the next guy? It's not just about the overall skill set too. It's demeanor, it's personality. It's not only how many, you know, ads can you sell, but, you know, can you really, really carry the league in that mantra? And I think we're struggling a little bit, you know, to find that. And that's not a knock to this younger generation currently. You know, Anthony Edwards obviously gets caught into this. Giannis has even said he doesn't want to be the face of the league. So you have all of those things kind of pushing and pulling against each other, which is an interesting situation, because I think people are just like, you know what, I want to play ball, I want to get my bag, and then I don't want to have to really do too much else after that. You know, be about my family. Those are things that matter to them. But being the face of the league is not something that I think everybody's striving for in the way that they once did in the years past.
Well, interestingly enough, Shaw, that is kind of the climate that we're in, because of the way that the business of basketball has elevated not just the players, but the marketability factor of what the game really should mean and how it means, and the cross culture globalization of the game. Because it's ironic that a person like Giannis speaks to the idea that he doesn't want to be in that conversation. That's not what he was shooting for, which means that his circumstances from where he came from, he made it a priority to get himself in a position where he is more empowered as a player. But under no circumstances did he ever feel like he wanted the weight of the game, to be the face of the game. And it's just interesting, because name me a basketball player that we don't have on that Mount Rushmore that didn't have that in the forefront of their mind. If they were going to be committed to it, they wanted to be the greatest. And look what it took for Giannis to get his championship. He elevated him. He had to basically become unknowing, like he stumbled into it. He basically had to become that guy. He had, in other words, like in the mortal words of Ric Flair, to be the man, you've got to beat the man, right? And Giannis, at that small window, was more of the man in the face of the NBA and people all around than even LeBron James. And that's not to knock LeBron James. I'm saying LeBron James set a very high standard, and yet he's still there. While a guy like Giannis is completely contempting, kind of hiding in the background again, kind of, you know, quietly going about trying to do his thing. It's just, again, it's a very interesting dynamic that we're seeing, and how the shifting of it also shifts the conversations genuinely.
Yeah, well, I think it's something, again, we'll definitely need to put a bookmark in this for now. I think much more conversation to drill into that, because there's a psychological aspect that I think that, not because they're younger players, but I think generations and times have changed, and the pressures that have come along with this. And you have the load management aspect.
White noise comes from, right?
Yeah,
before the white noise was coming from their contemporaries. Now it's coming from other figures, whether it be in the entertainment industry, whether it be from the social media perspective. It comes from agents. It comes from brands. It's not necessary. And in many ways, you're seeing a coalition of the players.
Yeah.
In being aligned, right? Like the guys are aligning themselves with dudes that think like, act like, and move like them, right? And they don't rock with the dudes that always have something to say about them. In most cases, during our generation, anyone saying something against them, they were dealing with it on the court. You said something about Jordan remembered it, right? He kept receipts, and he put it in your face when you guys had to play each other. Nowadays, guys just do it through Twitter or through Instagram, whatever the case may be, and it's all good and gesture, and it's great for the clicks, right? There's no publicity. Any publicity is good publicity for dudes. But in this case, when we're talking about GOAT conversations, you have to align that mentality. It's like, oh, you're going to rock with the guy that's just basically been trying to knock you off the block now, rather than saying you want to usurp him. It's kind of, it's kind of weird. I'm not going to lie. I would dare anyone to challenge that premise or that notion that's not something that would kind of move you funny. I don't want to say irk you, make you feel some kind of way. It should, but I can't speak for what your feelings are, right? But I'm just saying, like, it makes you feel a little funny.
Yeah, well, We'll talk about this, and I think in a little bit more in depth in the weeks to
Obviously,
come.
I got some things to say about that. So
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
gonna
yeah. I
put
mean,
that.
and I think we both do. So it will be a great conversation, when that time comes about. But I think it leads us into some of the great accomplishments that have happened for those who are still here rocking with us in today's NBA.
Absolutely. And then later on in the show, Shaw, we're gonna do a little sophomore check-in, see how our 2-year players, you know what I'm saying, second-year players are faring in the in this current NBA season. Do they have, the sophomore jitters, jinx? They got the yips, or are they are they flying high? Are they riding where they need to be for their respective teams? So we'll get into that. As always, be sure to get at my man Shaw, Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me at Game Face Lead, the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. Go to www.nbabaseline.com to check this show and all of our previous shows. Also, check with us if you see the blue and white logo. That is the 19 Media Group family. If you catch us on the YouTube channel, make sure that you subscribe to us. And more importantly, make sure you go to 19mediagroup.com to check not only us, but the great shows that are already out there. Great people, great content. What more can be said, man? 19 Media Group is on the rise, is on the uptick. So get down with the family. And open your ears up to some great listening content that's out there. All right, Shaw. So let's get right into the news and notes that's taking place right now. Obviously, the big topic of conversation is LeBron James basically accomplishing, something that's never been accomplished before. First player to 40,000 points. More importantly, 40,000 points, 10,000 assists, 10,000 rebounds. Never been done in the NBA. What are your thoughts about this? Because there's a direction that I want to go there, but I don't want to. Obviously, we don't want to take up the whole show doing it. But there is something that I think, because of this achievement, has realigned my mentality about how I see LeBron James and how I see about the conversation that I think people know that they really want to have deep in their heart of hearts, which is that GOAT conversation.
Well, I mean, statistically, he's going to be hard pressed to be matched, and I think we touched a little bit on this. Even talking about basketball mentality, from the All-Star conversation a little while ago, and there's just so many things that are going to go, at least that's currently constructed, that would go against a person being able to come in and do what he's done at this level for this level of longevity. Like, it's just impossible. The age restrictions, the health, just being on teams that allow you to be as good as you are and maximize your potential. Who really he truly is. I know James Harden said earlier in the year, but LeBron truly is a system. He is a system, not a system player. You build everything around what he's able to do on the basketball court. And I just don't know from that lens, will we really truly, not in our lifetime, more than likely, that we will see somebody kind of matching what LeBron has been able to do. So 40K, 10K, 10K, like that's absurd. That's absurd.
It's
And
a lot of NBA 2K playing for those people out there.
I mean, you'd be hard pressed to do that. It truly in a career.
You'd be dedicated to your craft if you're actually going to put those type of numbers up. The system may even actually break because of something like that, right?
It really is something that's amazing. And I think from our lens here now, while LeBron has been adversaries for us, for our respective teams, in that sense that we root for, if you will, there's no discounting what he's been able to do as a basketball legend, first ballot Hall of Famer, and obviously within the GOAT conversation, depending on where you land on things. So for me, another hats off to one of the best to ever do it here in LeBron James.
Listen, I am of that mindset. You and I have both been of that mindset because we grew up in this era of basketball that we still believe Michael Jordan is the GOAT, right? I'm not going to perceive to say I'm speaking for you, but I'm just saying that this is what we collectively have always understood about what our interpretation is. It's like Michael Jordan is the standard. Okay. Like, if you have not eclipsed Michael Jordan in some significant kind of way, we're really not even trying to have this kind of conversation. And while we have spent years, right, better part of almost 2 decades, where people are trying to fast track LeBron, he doesn't win a championship, but yet they're trying to say that he's the GOAT. He gets himself a couple of chips. How he gets his chips doesn't necessarily endear him, in my opinion, to ever eclipsing LeBron James. Loses some NBA finals, but finds a way to win a championship with an organization that's never even been around, or understood what a championship has meant. Basically gave a city, damn near a state almost, right? Something that they have never had before, which Michael Jordan can never really say that he's ever done, right? Because there's been great teams with the Chicago Bulls, but never the greatness with Michael Jordan. And ever will they ever achieve what Michael Jordan did in the stretch of time that he had been a Chicago Bull, right? And then we talk about how Michael Jordan basically walked away from the game, came back, and we're saying to ourselves, what would have happened if he'd not taken that year or two off to go do something else and actually play the game of basketball? And he probably would have 8 championships, right? You can't get 10. He was gone for only 2 years, right? So he won 3, stopped, and then won 3 more, right? There was 2 in the middle that, okay? So in essence, he would have won him 8 championships, probably 8 years consecutively, which is remarkable. Awesome, right?
A little presumptuous, but I
presumptuous.
get where you're going.
What I'm saying is that you could go in that direction if you really wanted to kind of think out of the box, right?
Sure.
And these are the arguments that we were dealing with and that we were naturally having because we're coming up with the Kevin Garnett's and the Paul Pierces. Anyway, fast forward all of this, right? LeBron James has reached 40,000 points. But I want people to truly understand he has narrowed this gap now. Because I don't think Michael Jordan can even do what LeBron James has been able to do. Even at high level, Michael Jordan. Now, Michael Jordan, one of the greatest scorers of all time, one of the greatest is the greatest competitor of all time in basketball, right? I think you can make an argument that no one set the standard high for team success than Bill Russell, but no one set the standard higher for going out and making it happen when it had to happen on the grandest of stages than Michael Jordan, because no one's beat him and his teams. When he's there, you pretty much put money on the fact that the Bulls are walking with that chip, okay? But everything else can be up for grabs when you're talking about Michael Jordan. Whether he truly naturally wanted to be a basketball. Remember, he played baseball. He played other sports. But it was basketball that he got pushed into. Not necessarily grew into, got pushed into. You can make the argument that LeBron James lived and breathed basketball. And while we wanted to make all of these other, sentiments about him going to play football, and he could have been a great tight end and all this other crap, he was always about basketball. And so when your point, James Harden says he is the system, I just want people to really truly understand LeBron James lived, breathed, and played basketball for 20 years. And as he is doing this, he's not doing this to just get minutes and get points and get accolades. He is still a vital part for a team that is still contending to possibly go to an NBA Finals, right? He is still, people can make the argument that while the Lakers can only go where Anthony Davis goes, this team doesn't do anything without LeBron James doing what he is doing right now. So his points that he's giving the Los Angeles Lakers, his minutes, everything that he's putting on, those stats that you're grabbing, they all are significant. We can't say that about Vince Carter. We couldn't even say that about Michael Jordan because on the back end of his career, everybody knew that he's there because he owns the Wizards and he is just there to, kind of elongate his legacy, to kind of still sow the seed. Hey, I'm still great, boys. You can't deal with me. But nothing ever what he was doing was significantly achieved. Like it was great, but we're not sitting there saying, oh my God, in awe of, no, look at what LeBron James is doing. And so it's hard, man, because I want to not say it, but if he's going to continue to keep doing this and continue to be as vital a player at age 40, 41.
Yep.
How can you not sit there and start talking about him being the greatest player of all time when it comes to basketball all around? You know what I'm saying? And I'm saying put the numbers aside. I'm saying that look at what he is still contributing to this game right now and is still playing at a level that we're trying to push the Jason Tatums, the Anthony Edwards, the Steph Curry, the Kevin Durant. We're still trying to push these guys ahead of him, and he's still setting the standard.
Yeah, I think what ends up happening in the LeBron Jordan debate is obviously LeBron got a quote unquote head start, by virtue of being able to play younger. But I think even if you're looking at somewhat apples to apples, then the GOAT conversation would skew towards LeBron because, well, he's had to do it for longer at the NBA level. And he's doing more at age 38, 39 than Jordan did at age 38 and 39 when he was in the Wizards, right? And I think there's a lot of factors and things to that. It's not maybe that cut and dry. But if you're just looking at that in the black and white, it's hard to argue, I think, with what LeBron has been able to do for the overall body of work. So I think when it comes to the GOAT conversation, you're 1,000% right, and then it matters. And now it's subjective, right? Just who do you like better? But statistically, LeBron has the edge. There's just there's no disputing that he just has the edge. While he doesn't have the titles. So I think that's where some people will continue to lean on when it comes to Mike. And I think in some cases, a lot of the people in the conversation right now didn't get to see Mike truly, right? And they might have saw truly the age 38, 39 years, in those Wizards days where it was dark, it was dark times. But similarly, we didn't see Oscar, and we didn't see Wilt, and we didn't see, Bill Russell, Kareem really in his heyday too, to kind of really compare for our ourselves and generations. So this debate is going to be one that transcends multiple generations and years and times for a long time. But I think right now, for the conversation you or I are having, I agree 1,000%. That gap is not that wide, no matter how you slice it. And if you say LeBron, I couldn't sit here and argue with you one way or the other. My perspective is Mike, but that's because that's what I grew up on.
My apologies. My mic just dropped. You dropped my mic on this conversation. One quick thing I wanted to bring up as well too, Shaw, that I really think can go in the favor of LeBron James. His game has had to evolve through 2 decades. And in doing so, he has been able to do it at a very high level, where I think you can make I don't know if you can't make the argument, or you do want to make the argument. When it came to Michael Jordan had to dictate his game to be relevant, whereas LeBron James has evolved. If we're talking about the game has had to extend itself, LeBron James is now shooting like over 40% from 3, right? So in a 3-point man's game, LeBron James is willing to do those type of things, where for a lot of guys at his age have literally played themselves out of the league, have literally played themselves out of significant minutes being played. He is still arguably one of the best players in the conference, right? Not a guy that you're adding on, or, we just want a locker room presence. No, he is the standard for what you're trying to tell some of these guys. Like, if you want to stay in this league, your game has to evolve, and you have to figure that out. Right? You have to have the IQ. It's not just, you can ball. Remember we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago about NBA All-Star Weekend, Shaw. And while everybody is lambasting LeBron because it was his fault that the, slam dunk contest has died away and all this other kind of stuff. Look, you could have said the same thing about LeBron James shooting the 3. Oh, LeBron James didn't participate in the 3-point contest. Well, LeBron James wasn't prioritizing shooting the 3 because the 3 wasn't as important. You know what I'm saying? But look now. Him shooting over 40% from 3, come next year, you should send him an invite and see what he does against Steph Curry and all those guys. If we're going to make it about that kind of argument, I'm saying LeBron James has evolved. And that's something that is hard pressed that you can challenge some of the great players, whoever they are, Kareem, all of them. At some point, there's a stopping point to whether or not their game can translate to where the game is currently trending towards. And LeBron James continues to find a way. And I say, that is an add to his greatness, so to speak, when you're having that kind of conversation. Could Michael Jordan's game translate 15, 20 years? Or you can see where the decline of Michael Jordan not doing it the same way he was doing it 10 years previously obviously put him in a position where he isn't as vital to the evolution of what that game is supposed to mean, except for the greatness that he gave us leading up to that point.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of other differences, and I don't want to go too far into it. I mean, I think LeBron is a better better physical specimen than Mike was, and not to say that Mike was out of shape. I think, but at LeBron's size and the overall girth and what he even put into his body over the years, I think just times have proverbially changed. But you bring up an interesting kind of lighter note conversation, or point rather. I believe, because LeBron did kind of jest. He's like, "Oh, I don't know if I'm going to just walk off into the sunset, or, I'm going to do the media tour, if you will." We know he's going to do the long tour and say the goodbyes and everything like that too. But maybe in that All-Star week, in his final All-Star week game, maybe you'll see him participate in everything. maybe he'll do the 3-point contest, the skills challenge, or whatever is happening at that time. And, I doubt he'd go so far as the dunk contest either, but maybe
he's only going to participate if they start upping the ante on the prize money. That's
or maybe he does like one like specialty dunk or something like that too, in some semblance of a tribute or whatever. I don't know, but I think whenever that time comes for his farewell tour, that All-Star weekend will probably be one that you don't want to miss. It'll be special. We'll see LeBron and everything on all his glory overall, and we'll see how his team is doing at that stage of his life as well too, because also obviously he's going to want to stay healthy to try to bring home some semblance of a championship. He's going to always want to be in that conversation no matter what.
Absolutely. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Moving things along, Shaw, James Harden moves to 21st all-time scoring, and Andre Drummond moves to 33rd all-time scoring. So
rebounding on Andre.
Rebounding. Damn, I really wish he was all-time scorer. Anyway,
he does too.
All right, which one's more impressive to you, Shaw?
To me, more impressive, I think, is probably the scoring, but more surprising to me was the rebounding. I think we think about Andre Drummond now as a guy who was high usage for a little while. Then there was a viral clip of him saying, "Hey, I effed around and almost was out of the league. Now I'm making the minimum, et cetera, et cetera." So he's fit into a nice role with a decent Chicago team, I guess, to some degree. I know we've had our conversations about them this year specifically, but he put up some really gaudy numbers on the rebounding side throughout his career, and even more so specifically this year. So to realize Andre Drummond already was a top 50 rebounder in NBA history, it's just one of those things. Maybe I just took it for granted, and maybe that's going to sound porous to people like, oh well, you guys cover the league and so forth and so forth.
I think we've taken a lot of things for granted, right? I think we've taken for granted that LeBron James was going to get the 40, 10, 10, and 10. Like it wasn't like this is much of big conversations to be due, because we're expecting him to do this, because everything about him says he's going to still be doing this probably next year, right? Are we going to have this celebration for me? The most impressive thing is Andre Drummond hitting 33rd. Like, I'm expecting James Harden to be one of the all-time great scorers of the game. Him, Kevin Durant, right? Like, so, now if you tell me James Harden is going to be top 10 all-time assists, now I'm going to be impressed. If you're going to tell me he's going to be, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's going to be one of the greatest free throw shooters in NBA history. Now, for the amount of time that he gets to the free throw line, I'll be damn near impressed. You know what I'm saying? Because just as much as you can get up to that free throw line and shoot as many damn free throws doesn't mean that you're making every single free throw. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just really impressed, because you can make the argument, Shaw, Andre Drummond has been dealt a raw deal since he's come into the NBA. I think we've missed out on really one of the truly dynamic, gifted big men in the game, because of how much he was maligned when he first started with the Detroit Pistons and everything that was going on with the organization and how they were using the roster and everything like that. And you fast forward now to where he basically earned himself the opportunity, albeit I think it's messed with him a little bit. I think he got a little too high in himself, and you can clearly tell that he's not the same person that he was when he had that hunger in him. And that's not to dismiss or dismerse. We all have different priorities about how we see the game and where we want to grow with the game. But I'm just saying that, like, had he been had that passion been there and it been nurtured properly, he would have probably been up that list a lot faster than the time that it's taken him to, like, he would be a top 25 type rebounder if he was under the right type of culture. Because that, to me, how impressive he was to me when he was coming out of the University of Connecticut.
I don't disagree. I think his last year, he's had to play behind Vooch a lot. Billy Donovan is changing some of that now, and they're more matchup based. So in the games where he and Vooch are playing together, you're seeing putting up 18 and 20, rebounds with regularity, back to like the old Pistons days. So to me, I know a lot of people are like, oh my God, spending a lot of time talking about Andre Drummond. He's 33rd. He passed David Robinson, and I don't think that's any small feat.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is nothing to sniff at.
And I think ultimately you're right. Had he been able to keep his head on straight the entirety of the time and not take his own opportunities for granted, he would probably already be maybe in the top 20 already. So to me, it's just a testament to kind of keep going and to understand what you're good at. And there was time he flirted with, hey, I'm going to trying to start shoot the corner three or whatever the case may be. didn't go quite the way he wanted to. And I think that's when he was trying to truly fit into what today's culture was saying. NBA culture was saying, well, you need to be a big man who can shoot. And it was more, I think, more of his attitude and what he thought he could be that got him into some troubles and it didn't give him the contracts that he ultimately wanted. But he's only 30 years old. You know, I think he can continue to play at this level for another at least 3 to 4 years, especially with the rebounding side, you know, and not too far behind him is DeAndre Jordan, you know, who's obviously slowing down himself too, but, you know, he's a top 50 rebounder in this league as well too. So shout out to those guys who've kind of stayed true to the essence of what they bring. But I think Andre Drummond has a little bit more runway here too. And, you know, we can see him in the top 25, even top 20 of all-time rebounders, which would be Hall of Fame worthy, I would imagine.
You know who, you know, you could have kind of, if you had to put him like where he teetered on between, you know, like how he's just past David Robinson. You remember Hassan Whiteside?
Yeah,
he
just retired.
He just recently retired, right? And I lean more. I bring him up not to diss. I'm saying, weren't we high on Hassan Whiteside and his upside of what he could potentially do? And somewhere along the line, his mentality, his approach to the way that he was playing the game of basketball, I think took away from his ability to find a place where he could be a contributor and not so much as just a placeholder on the roster or a detriment to the roster, you know. And so I think Andre Drummond understood that. I think he recognizes that. And one last thing too, Shaw, I want people to understand this from our people who are listening. You know, if you ever have aspirations of you or yourself or your kids or whatever like that in playing basketball, these things that these terminologies we throw out there, rebounding, offensive rebounding, defensive rebounding, there's a reason why it's what it is, right? If you don't make a shot and you want an opportunity to make another shot, you got to get the ball. You got to rebound, right? And I feel like at times when people start chirping in some of these guys' ear, they make it seem like, oh, just stand underneath the rim, the ball will come to you. There's a science to rebounding the basketball, man. There is, you look at Draymond Green. Do you know why there are more people apt to put 4, 5 guys on the roster, swing guys on the roster, guards are rebounding the basketball? Because they seem to rebound the basketball better than the big men. Why is that? If you're big, you should occupy that paint all the time because it's not as easy as people think it is. There is a science to this thing. And you look at guys like Draymond Green, you know what I'm saying? Perfect example of that. You look at guys like during one particular stretch, right? Kevin Love. These guys are not the biggest and the tallest, but they were the best at what they were doing to rebound the basketball. And so I challenge people who, you know, who get this mentality, like because you're 7'1" or 7'2", that you just naturally have this gift of rebounding. We've been saying this about Jaren Jackson for the longest time, right? Like this dude should be a double machine every time he walks on that court. What if the reason why that's not the case is because he doesn't understand the science to rebounding the basketball? He doesn't read well. At some point, you got to stop trying to force him underneath there with the expectations he's going to give you double doubles. And he has to start recognizing what he's really good at. He needs to be the best at. Because for his size and length and athleticism, there's no reason why he doesn't naturally get 10 rebounds a night. That's the reason why Shaq gets hard on these dudes, right? He gives them a hard time when he's doing his commentating, because he thinks that these guys should naturally be able to get these rebounds, and they just don't. And I think you're seeing Andre Drummond recognizing what he's truly, genuinely good at, and I applaud him for that, because he could have played himself right out of this league, bro.
Yeah. Well, incidentally or anecdotally, LeBron's 31. So Andre Drummond is chasing LeBron James with, you know, LeBron James is a top 30 rebounder.
There'll be a nice large gap. He'd be like, damn, slow down, LBJ.
Yeah.
I hope Andre is still in the league, you know, well enough to be able to catch that. Because I'm not saying that LeBron James, you know, should not be. But if there's ever any motivation, there you go.
I mean, well, numbers only going to continue to go. So he's about what, 200-300 rebounds ahead of Andre right now. I mean, Drummond's going to get 20 a night, but I mean, he's not getting those minutes to be able to do that. But anyway, just again, anecdotally, LeBron is right there. So
all right, Sean. Real quick, NBA competition committee to review if the league is too offensively focused. Oh, really? I'm sorry.
Love it, right?
Yeah,
I put this on here for you. I know Joe Dumars has been making ways
One of
and
the
having
greatest
some
defenders in the
conversations
game
with
of
various
basketball.
reporters. And yeah, they'll take a look this summer to try to gather evidence. They'll do a deep dive, which I mean, I think we all know what it is, but what ends up happening? What are the subtle changes that will start to skew this back to some semblance of normality? There's been all kinds of stats being thrown out there right now, right? And I think one of them, and I'm going to get it wrong, but I'm going to give you an approximation. They're like, say 10 years ago, the average offensive rating was like 105, and now the average offensive rating is like 115. So like, and that's just, points per possession, things that are happening. Yes, the three ball, all these other things. And yes, offensive players are more skilled than they ever have been. But I think refereeing is probably worse than it's ever have been as well too. And I think all of these things lead to what we're seeing, and there's just a lack of effort, on defense. So the league is going to do what they call is their due diligence to figure out how they can skew this back to a little bit more of the mean. But I wouldn't expect anything crazy because offense ultimately does sell seats. Nobody wants to go back into the 88 to 85 type games of the mid 90s and late 90s, but there is a better semblance of basketball that can be played out there. And I think defense is definitely at the heart of that.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's at the heart of it, but I also think as well too that a lot of this has been manifested by the lax approach, so to speak, on being consistent with calling the game the way it needs to be called. Like, it's different if the offensive sets have allowed the game to score as much as they do, but it's totally undermined at times when time comes that you truly see teams that are making a concerted effort to be defensively minded, and the referees don't want to see it or can't see it, right? And when I say can't, it's because they're being bound by the rules, to call things in a certain kind of way. The problem is that it's so inconsistent that it makes it difficult, and so you just kind of let it be what it is. So hopefully they'll figure something out. I don't think it's going to change the fact that as long as a three ball is a primary, offensive mechanism that triggers what the offenses are doing and giving you, and the pace of the game is going to continue to be faster, means more opportunity of shots and things of that nature. I just think that the game is going to be scored the way it's scored. I think where I want to see the game improve is when you see true defensive effort, you see true stops being made, that the game isn't being undermined by inconsistent calling, slowing down of certain things, because, now all of a sudden we're trying to get into the minutia of things. And, and I also think too, sports betting, the sports books is having an impact on what these things are. Let's not act like it isn't. It is. So all of these things I think needs to be addressed, looked at, and spoken to with an honest fervor about what we're asking, for us, the fans that watch the game, but also, people that want to see a quality product. This thing has to come together a little bit better.
Well, we'll see what Joe D and his committee come up with and what rules will be proposed. Summer League will be a great lynch point, or right before, because then they sometimes will try out some of those new rules and tweaks there to kind of see how it's matriculating, and then ultimately try to bring it in, before the new season starts. So more to come.
More to come. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we're going to talk about some of the injuries that are taking place in the NBA, and then a little bit later on, we'll discuss some of the sophomores that we think are doing their thing, or some of them are not doing their thing. So you don't want to miss out on that. But first, did you know that there's a whole collection of black-led products that fit into your daily routine and lifestyle that you can get at Walmart? And it's important because it shows Black founders some love, not just during Black History Month, but all year long. Because every time we buy a Black-led brand, we're making room or creating demand for another Black-led brand. Black founders and the products they bring to the table are creating a whole new world of choices at Walmart. Some of the products I want to check out are Natural Vert Granola, Zach and Zoe Honey, Scotch Porter Beard Balm, and Partake Cookies. Go to Walmart.com/Black and Unlimited to discover all the amazing Black-owned products that you can add to your daily routine. More Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw. Don't go away. We're back, Cali Warren Sharp, Baseline NBA podcast. And Shaw, a couple of injuries that we obviously need to highlight. The big one, obviously, earlier this previous week, Trae Young needed to get surgery. Unfortunate circumstance. The likelihood is he's done for the season. Because even if the Atlanta Hawks, if there was any semblance of him wanting to come back, I mean, for what? The Hawks really are not in any position to do anything. Scottie Barnes also went down to an injury going up for, I think, to block a shot and wound up smashing his hand on the rim. Russell Westbrook is also suffering injury as well, too. So he's going to be out for some significant time. Who do we think is the most important in as far as injuries go? And who do you think which one is the most impactful, I guess is the best way to ask that.
Well, I mean, I think if you think Atlanta had a semblance of spark to try to fight for the play-in, it's that, because he's so ball dominant. His usage rate is extremely high in Atlanta, and yet DeJounte Murray is still there, and give Jalen Johnson and some others a chance to shine here. But the Hawks were struggling even with that. So Brooklyn's been pretty bad and pretty porous. They just had a coaching change, and then the aforementioned Toronto with Scottie Barnes. They're technically not out of the play-in race right now, but Trae leaving or being injured for however long he ultimately is here, they said 4 weeks, and then they'll reevaluate. That's the most impactful, I think, to the Hawks and the overall bottom of the playoff standings. Interestingly enough, though, Westbrook's impact on the Clippers could be felt, but that's why you have Harden and Paul George and Kawhi. So they can probably sustain that because Norman Powell can do a little bit more, I think, offensively. That secondary play creation probably now comes back down to PG and or Kawhi, when Harden is out of the game. So to me, the Clippers should be able to withstand it, and Russ should ultimately be back for what the Clippers hope is a long playoff run. But of the three, the Atlanta Hawks are going to be the most impacted by their star being out for sure.
Yeah, Young is going to be the most impactful because I think, again, it stalls whatever moves that the Atlanta Hawks are going to need to make for this upcoming offseason.
A lot of people say he might have played his last game. The Lakers stuff is starting to pick up a lot of momentum. And, if you say if they fall out of this play-in race, we may not see Trae Young back in an Atlanta Hawk uniform, which would be really interesting, if that were to come to fruition.
Yeah, and I think what that does is, again, is Atlanta Hawks fans saying, damn, another star leaving us again, right? Like, forget whether or not, like, the idea is, okay, let's build around DeJounte Murray. You have to also question yourself, like, are you really trying to build around DeJounte Murray? I mean, didn't he have an opportunity for the San Antonio Spurs to kind of build around him? Is he someone that you're trying to build around, so to speak? I think he's a great player, but was he supposed to be a franchise player over Trae Young just because he was
that
more?
Question comes up a lot, though, and I think the answer for a lot of people is like neither one of them. Even as good as Trae is, like, start from scratch, trade both of them, and see where you go.
So the Hawks had an opportunity to kind of right that ship, so to speak, by moving DeJounte and getting some significant pieces if you believe that there's something out there in the draft or whatever the case may be. But now with Trae Young, now you open up that conversation about, well, if Trae Young isn't going to be here, then what exactly was Trae Young here for to begin with, right? Like, so it's all hype, but then, because you can't keep star players, nobody wants to come and play for the Atlanta Hawks. So, it sucks, man, because, again, they're going to be held hostage to a situation, a circumstance they really don't have any control over. But it is kind of their fault, because if they were a little bit clearer on what their plans were, they should have moved on them when the opportunity presented itself. Look, even if Trae Young chose to want to still be here in Atlanta, the combination of him and DeJounte Murray just doesn't seem to fit and work as I think they had hoped for. And now that you have Quinn Snyder, which means you've pivoted and said, this is more about what Quinn Snyder can do with this team than it is about the players that we're bringing in. I would think that Quinn Snyder wants guys that he can coach and can be able to run the system that he wants to run. And maybe Young and Murray are just neither one of those two guys are capable of being able to do that.
Time will ultimately tell on how they finish out this season. So that's something to clearly watch. Right now, they're holding the 10 seed, about a game and a half above Brooklyn, who is they're not really doing much themselves. So the Hawks might, by default, get into it.
Teams together, right? Just merge the teams together. You're not going to move Brooklyn back to New Jersey. Yeah, merge Brooklyn and Atlanta. It's just people from BK go to ATL anyway all the time. Hey, listen, now the one other thing I wanted to make mention, though, Shaw, if you ask me which injury is more significant between Barnes and Westbrook, I would challenge you is to say whoever is going to be on the sidelines, that their presence and impact is going to have the effect on this team positioning themselves where they need to be. So in other words, if Westbrook's injury is preventing him from being there, from being around his guys, I think that impacts the Clippers. It's not so much the productivity that you can still get on the court because you got Paolo and those guys, but I just think that the Clippers resonate well with a engaged Russell Westbrook, and he's proven to you that he is all about this team. He loves this team. He wants to be there for this team. So if he's out there, I think the Clippers are going to be fine. When he's not there, I'd really be curious to see who's going to step up and be the Westbrook voice in that locker room. Who's going to be that dude that's going to really kind of get these guys up for these games, in these stretch of games that he's not out on the court for. Scottie Barnes, this is the opportunity for him to have that kind of impact for a Toronto Raptors team that has play-in potential, right? So can he be that guy that while he's going through that stretch of injuries, can he lead this team? I think this, to me, will be a good measuring stick, Straw, to determine, did the Raptors make the right play in moving everybody and just being about building around Barnes, not because just what his talent gives you on the court, but what influence he has to those guys in the locker room that is currently vying for playing opportunity.
I'll just say this. I think because he's out indefinitely, so we don't know if and when he'll be back this year. The biggest part of Barnes being out is the continuity that gets missed with all the new parts. So you'd want to see them play even those last 20 to 22 games with RJ Barrett, with Quickly, even Pirtle, just making sure that they can continue to build. And yeah, if he was healthy, could they make a run at the play-in? What ultimately is what that young team needs is just that continuity and continuing to build, even with a rookie head coach there as well too. So that's where that's going to be impactful. But I think Scottie is one of those guys who's still going to be around the team. He's very vocal, and I think he'll be able to still lead to some degree while being on the sidelines. But they need the on-court chemistry to build, and I think that's where Toronto's going to miss that the most.
Absolutely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we're going to do a sophomore check-in. We're going to basically kind of get a feel for how our two-year guys, second-year guys are doing right now. Those are on the uptick. Those are on the downtick. So you don't want to miss out here on The Baseline. This segment of The Baseline is brought to you by McDonald's. Imagine if we were to live in a world where the most iconic creators of anime merge powers with the most iconic creators of the Golden Arches, creating a universe of limitless possibilities, taking our imagine and taste buds to levels unimaginable. Welcome to McDonald's. That's right, not McDonald's, my friend. This is McDonald's. For a limited time, anime fans and lovers of the Chicken McNuggets will have a chance to immerse themselves into their favorite fictional restaurant. And what better way for these iconic tenements of taste to be appreciated by introducing the bold, new McDonald's savory chili sauce. When you combine your chicken nuggets with McDonald's bold savory chili sauce, along with those iconic fries and Sprite, your taste buds will go Super Saiyan in a hurry. But are you ready? You better be, because this flavorful sauce will only be around till March 25th to go along with your 10-piece McNuggets. Head to your nearest McDonald's and try the new bold savory chili sauce while supplies last.
Time to break it down.
Time now for the breakdown. Callie Warrenshaw, Baseline NBA podcast. And our topic for the breakdown, we're going to be discussing the sophomores, checking in on these dudes, second year. Are they making things happen or just things happening when it comes to these guys? My man Shaw, man. Listen, no one can question the play of our man Paolo. He is undoubtedly the engine that is driving the Orlando Magic currently right in the playoff conversation, right? Like they're right there. Chet Holmgren, what more can be said? He is definitely a major factor to the Oklahoma City Thunder's ascension, even though, a lot of it is driven by SGA's MVP campaign right now. Keegan Murray still amazing. Like this dude is like second year, he's elevating. So there's a lot of solid players that are still significantly making their names felt and present. Who do you think outside of Banchero and Holmgren have really stood out in your mind as to saying, you know what, this dude's going to be all right?
I'm so glad you asked. So I think this is a great opportunity to plant the flag again for my guy, Jalen Williams, J-Dub in OKC. I think right now he would project as the third best player out of this draft. Jabari Smith in Houston is having a pretty good second season. Keegan Murray has definitely shown some signs in Sacramento. Jaden Ivey similarly in Detroit, although his coach didn't play him for a large part of the beginning of the season, which was weird. And Mathurin in Indiana has played well too. But to me, I think J-Dub has got it. I think he's by far and away the third best player, in this, and maybe not by far and away, but by a decent enough margin for me where I'm comfortable at least to say that. And the fact that OKC has Chet and him in the same draft really kind of goes to show you the moxie, if you will, of Sam Presti. Now, there's some other guys here who have been dealing with injuries, dealing with some inconsistency in playoff time. We're not writing them off. But if you're asking the question right now, I think J-Dub has got it as one of the better overall picks, and he went like 14 or so, 13. So listen, I'm excited for what OKC's been able to do, and I really think a lot of teams are going to be kicking themselves if they're not already kicking themselves for not taking him.
Well, I'm gonna speak to your other young son, your boy Benedict Mathurin. I think that he is really, again, he's as steady as they come. It's going to be interesting to see, whether or not he will ever find himself in a position to be as a starter. He automatically his ascension reminds me a lot like James Harden. That he potentially could be that guy where if he's scoring a significant amount of points, if he helps usher the Indiana Pacers with Halliburton and those guys, to a solid playoff run, when it's time for him to get that bag, does he see himself going to another place that needs, a front face type player scorer that he sees himself in that elk? You know what I mean? It'll be interesting to see. He just has to me like that moxie, so to speak, as far as what he could potentially do. Whereas guys like Keegan Murray place him right in the system and he comes out and he executes. He's a solid dude. Reminds me a lot like what Harrison Barnes is. Ironic because Harrison Barnes, is basically mentoring this kid. But there will come a point where the Kings may have to move on from Barnes, and Keegan Murray might be that next guy up to supplant if that system stays in place. So, but I love Mathurin's opportunity in his game because he has never wavered from the fact that wherever he comes in, however he comes in, he does damage. And this is a question of how much longer can he continue to do that without the Pacers recognizing they got to find significant playing time for him, or he himself realizes that this is probably the best it'll be for Indiana because they've already got everything supplanted with the way that the Pacers are constructed.
Well, I think it was important for them to not give up on him in getting Siakam, I think, initially. So some say that Masai might have had a misstep by not getting Nembhard, who was also in the second round of the same draft we were talking about, and then obviously Mathurin, who was the sixth pick. So I can see why the Pacers wanted to hold on. And Mathurin's inconsistency has been probably the biggest detractor from him, I think, to this point. He's now back in the starting lineup here as Indiana is trying to close out this season, but he's shown some really great signs of being a capable scorer, a decent rebounder on the wing as well too, and with a little bit of effort, not a terrible defender. So I think the sky is definitely the limit for him, and he has got a lot of great ability. I just say that I think when I look further down the line and who's been able to capture the opportunity this year, it's been Jalen Williams, outside of obviously Chet and Paolo. Yeah, and I know you're not comparing. I'm just talking from my standpoint. And another guy who I'd like to highlight, and I think has done really, really, really well in the minutes, but has had a hard time staying healthy, is Jalen Duren. And I think he pegs as a similar guy to we talked about, like an Andre Drummond previously, maybe even a little bit more athletic than Drummond is and was. But Duren is a guy plus rebounder, still trying to figure out his own body, if you will, and how he can utilize that and stay out of foul trouble. But I think he's somebody who projects as a really, really good double guy for many years to come. And he's just got to figure out the defensive principles too. Sometimes he gets a little crazy with it. Thinks his skill set is more than it is, trying to dribble too much. But ultimately, I think Duren is a guy too that the Pistons, and I guess it was a draft day trade that they ended up acquiring him from Charlotte, but makes a lot of sense for where Detroit is trying to go, and can be a part of that building block for that future with Cade Cunningham.
Yeah, another person that I think is really having a solid year, given the circumstances, Christian Braun. for the Denver Nuggets. He came in, he was a vital, role player to helping them win in a championship. Mike Malone could have easily kind of, given other minutes to other players and maybe assuming that he's not ready, but he's still a very important person, especially since they lost a couple of role players in the offseason, and that's elevated his usage and time and stuff. And you're starting to see the Denver Nuggets round into form, and he is very much a part of that rotation. He was basically on the back end of the first round of this draft, and I like his game. You see that the Golden State Warriors took a page from that and getting Brandon Posmiski and how they've deployed him and look where he's elevated himself, right? So
yeah,
watch for these multi-tool guard, guys who are coming in. You see the Celtics try to do that now with Peyton Pritchard, so he's setting a standard there, because right now he's seeing a lot of more significant minutes than guys like Walker Kessler and Roddy and Beauchamp. This is a remarkably deeper class than I think we gave credit for the last few seasons. Like, a lot of these guys got inserted very quickly, to for their respective teams. And now we're fast forwarding 3 years ahead. And, not all of these guys are seeing any significant minute jumps. Some of these guys are out of rotation. Some of these guys are back to playing in the G League. You know what I mean? So it's remarkable. A good handful of these guys certainly have stepped up, but you make the argument that, like, a lot of these guys still have a lot of work to ahead of them if they even see themselves, making another significant leap back into, the good graces, so to speak, of playing in the NBA like that.
On a somewhat of a negative note, if you will, the guy who I was really excited about, I think had high as a ceiling in terms of the positionality of what he was supposed to bring this coming into this year was Walker Kessler. Mm-hmm. And he's had some injuries, but he seemed to have fallen out of favor pretty quickly in Utah. And the Jazz are playing a bunch of guys who most people would not be able to recognize on the street at times. Right. And the fact that Kessler has not been able to command minutes, like command and demand minutes, is a little bit, shocking. And it's so interesting perspective, because remember last year, and they were like, oh my God, Walker Kessler, he really he came on the latter part of the season, the second half, and finished extremely strong. And then they were just maligning the Gobert trade. And it's like, wow, imagine if Walker Kessler was in Minnesota right now instead of Rudy Gobert. Well, the times have shifted dramatically. I think thanks to the situation. And yes, I understand there was a major haul in terms of draft picks and capital that Utah still got out as a result of that. But it's just so interesting now to kind of see that, because I don't feel like Kessler, and I know Kessler is not producing the same way that Utah would have expected, and something's going on there where it has just because he's not even getting the minutes and the opportunity. So I hope he really is healthy, but he does not seem to be, like I said, commanding those minutes, and it's really been a strange situation to kind of watch up there in Utah.
Listen, I completely agree with you, Shaw. I am surprised that Walker Kessler's stock has dropped as quickly as it has. I was probably more of a slow trend uptick, maybe because of the fact that I was more focused on what the Jazz wanted to do with the roster that they had, currently constructed. So, it's interesting. We'll see what happens. Maybe this is just going to chalk it up to a down year. He's just not ready yet, and see what the off season may do. And maybe he may have a resurgence, so to speak. But I agree with you. Very, very surprised that that hasn't played out the way that we thought that might have been. I want to ask you this real quick, Shaw. Jeremy Sochan. What are your thoughts about him? It's interesting, like, how everybody's on this. Yeah, the Spurs team, not, obviously not a good basketball team. Can't wait to see what Wemby does with an actually really good team. Hey, he was a top 10 pick. I mean, he's obviously getting minutes in Greg Popovich. You think Popovich is high on him, or do you see that he and Wemby probably they're not going to vibe that well, right? Like, and if you're talking about restructuring the roster, so to speak, do you bail on Sochan, or do you buy into the idea that he could be equally as great with him and Johnson and maybe a few more of the pieces around that?
I think with Sochan, it's more of what are you asking him to do? So they got into this aspect of, well, let's play him at point guard to begin the year, give him some reps, and try to get him just increase his overall basketball IQ. And it ended up hurting him more than helping. So it was a failed experiment. Did he get something out of it? Hopefully, maybe you won't see the results of that until 2 years down the line, where he might have a better understanding and reads, having played point guard for what it was the first 30 to 40 games of the year before they realize this is a terrible idea. But to me, he still pegs as a rangy defender, can defend multiple guys. He's going to be streaky when it comes to his outside shooting, which is, well, I wouldn't even say it's streaky. It's kind of non-existent, but he has had some games where he gets 30 or so. And that's because he's driving and, utilizing his physicality. So he's still, to me, he's like, I don't know, this is a lazy comparison, but he's like a Scottie Barnes light, without, I think the overall offensive capability that Barnes possesses. What a lot of what Barnes does, though, is he utilizes physicality. He backs guys down, has a nice touch, around the rim and a decent mid-range shot, and then a developing three-pointer. Sochan is not quite as skilled as Scottie Barnes is, but I think if they were to even get him to 50 to 60% of that, they'd be happy. Right now, he's more of a defender that I don't feel like is getting utilized in the way that the Spurs can ultimately. He needs to be coming off a lot of cuts and screens and that type of thing, and not trying to do too much play creation or not spot up shooting or any of those things like that too. He's got to be in movement. That way he can get some easier baskets and then focus on the defense.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I totally agree with you. And again, we'll see. We'll see. It's ironic how we're talking about this, because I do believe that while it's great that Wemby is doing these phenomenal things, if you're a teammate of him, you kind of are like, damn you, man. Like, seriously, you may accelerate what learning curve I would probably have needed for the San Antonio Spurs to still remain a San Antonio Spur, or it could really usher certain moves being made a lot quicker, because obviously the idea is that you have this window of greatness and you have to build around that window. And it could mean that his role, his position, where he is on this rotation in this roster or whatever the case may be, may get sacrificed or, submarined, you know what I'm saying? Very quickly because of the circumstances. So.
Well, a lot of people think Keldon Johnson is not going to be a long-time Spur. They feel like, does he and Vassell, Devin Vassell rather, are they too duplicitous in some capacity? Do you need both of those guys? And I think one or two of those guys, with Keldon Johnson, than the one that most people think would potentially get moved on from. While Sochan is, still youngish. I mean, Keldon's not old himself, but I think Sochan is more malleable and doesn't obviously need a lot of shots in essence to be able to fit into that system. So I think we'll be seeing some of the Spurs trying to do some stuff here that ultimately complements Wemby, because to me, the bigger question is, Wemby might be ready to ride faster than the Spurs thought he was. And then faster than a lot of us thought he was. And I think, the year of development, we'll see what he does, but that's a Ferrari right now. And you don't put the Ferrari, on the city road. You need to open that thing up on the expressway and
on the Autobahn. Get them on the Autobahn.
I think they need to put some acceptable accelerant on here too. They got to be careful about the mix. But this is a guy who's ready to kind of rock out here. And I'd be surprised if they just continue to try to slow roll this and, but we'll build and build and build. Like, no, you need some bodies in here, because Wemby's he's ready to go.
Listen, I completely agree with you, man. Absolutely agree. Awesome show this week, man. And, like I said, I love the fact that you highlighted Jalen Williams. I was going to ask you, who in the second round, but they're really, if you really think about it, the steal of that draft was Jalen Williams, and the fact that what he's been able to do for the Thunder, where he was positioned and what he's been able to contribute and give immediately, speaks more to his length and longevity in this NBA than I think people are actually speaking about, and something that we have to keep on an eye out for. I mean, he's potentially an NBA All-Star. I think it's just a matter of time. He's just going to be an NBA All-Star. There's no question, with the way that he plays and his style of game and how it translates. And as long as the Thunder are a viable team that's going to be in playoff conversations for the next few years, I think that that's easily going to be the ascension for Jalen Williams. So good call on that one, my brother. Good call. All right, man. Any final thoughts before we mosey on up out of here?
I mean, it's been a good one, a long one as well too. But hopefully, fans and listeners enjoyed it. I will say, in terms of this conversation, shout out to Torrey Eason as well too. Having a rough year with his health, but I think another guy who, with health and time, is going to be a very good basketball player in this league for years to come. But love everyone's thoughts on the GOAT conversation. Everyone's thought on LeBron and the milestones and kind of the basketball mortality of this iteration of this generation of NBA superstars. So tune in to the baseline NBA_baseline on IG, and then obviously NBA baseline on X now. Got it right this time, not Twitter.
Nice. As always, man, we appreciate you and yours for hopping on board with us this week for the baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You know we do. We'll catch up with you next time.